Hello everybody, how's it going? I will listen today about nested for loops. We will put for loop inside for loop. We call it nested for loop. All right, we have outer for loop, and inside it that we call it inner for loop. For that, we call these things nested for loops. So let's go to see what is nested for loops and to know we use it for what exactly. All right. So this is the syntax of the normal for loop. We start with using for keyword, and after that we have initialization, integer I equal 1, and semicolon, condition, semicolon, update. And if the condition is true, the command will execute the body of the loop, which means the code of the for loop. Nested for loop, it's like this. We start with for keyword and we open bracket, initialization, condition, update, and inside the curly bracket of the first for loop, inside it we put the second for loop. For that we call the nested for loop. For example, we use nested for loop to create times table, or they call it also multiplication table, but it's not in English, more as a times table. So let's go to code directly to Visual Studio to see how we can use nested for loops. All right, this is our code of nested for loop. We start with for keyword, and after that we open bracket, we put the initialization, you already know it, integer I equal 1 semicolon, and after that condition, y less or equal 10 semicolon, after that the update I plus plus. So inside this for loop we put another for loop, called it the inner for loop. For that we have one for loop inside the another one, we called it nested for loop. So what we have in the outer for loop, if the condition is true, it will be true for sure because I represent 1. So 1 less than or equal 10, it's true. So compiler will execute what inside this outer for loop, which is see out less than less than. This is string I equal less than I, which is it will be printed or displayed on console screen 1 because I represent now 1. We still didn't do update for it. First, we will execute what inside the outer for loop. The compiler will execute what inside the outer for loop, the big for loop, because the condition is true. 1 less than or equal 10. Yes, 1, it's less than 10. Not equal 10, but less than 10. All right? So the compiler will come here, check what we have inside this outer for loop. We have this line of code. We will print it and display it across the screen. And also we have another for loop inside the big or outer for loop. So we have inner for loop. Inside this for loop, the inner for loop, what it has integer I equal 1. So we have another initialization. This is normal for loop, and we have semicolon, j less or equal 10 semicolon, j plus plus. J represent what? J represent 1. So 1 less than equal 10, that's true. So the compiler, while you see the condition of the inner for loop that exists inside the outer for loop is true, this condition is true, j less than 10. 1 less than 10, because j represent 1. It stores inside it value number 1. So the condition is true, the compiler will go inside the inner for loop, execute for us this line of code, which is see out less than I, and multiplication mark as a string or asterisk to print it on the console screen, display it on console screen, and less than j, which means 1 multiply 1. Why 1 multiply 1? Because I still represent 1 and j also still represent 1. So 1, it will be I, it will be printed on console screen, displayed on console screen as a 1, and this asterisk, it will be printed as string multiplication mark, and j also still represent 1, so it will be 1 multiply 1, and this equal as a string, and in the end 1 multiply 1, it will give us what? 1. I is represent 1 here in the outer for loop, j still represent 1 here in the inner for loop, so 1 multiply 1 to give us 1, and the compiler will get back to the inner for loop update, which is here, j plus plus. Compiler will update the inner for loop value, which is the j. So j, it will be 2 less than 10. So again, the compiler, yeah, it's true the condition. So again, the compiler will print the line of code inside the inner for loop and so on till this inner for loop condition become false, and I value will remain constant till the condition of the inner for loop become false, because the compiler not still finished with this for loop, inner for loop, still updating the j. Every time the condition of the inner for loop is true, the compiler get inside the inner for loop and execute this line of code, and compiler get back again to the j upgraded by 1. I plus plus is increase the number by 1, which means j it will be 1, and j it will be 2, and j it will be 3 till j it's become 10. The compiler will exit this inner for loop, but while the compiler still executes for 10 times this line of code that exists inside the inner for loop, the I value will remain constant until the condition of the inner for loop become false. When the condition of inner for loops become false, for example here j represent 11, 11 less than 10, no, 11 equal 10, no. So the compiler will exit this for loop and complete the line of code of this outer for loop, which is print this line of code to make space or line after each times table. Because here the first time we will print what? We will print the first time table of number 1. And after we finish print the first time table of number 1, the compiler will get back again to outer for loop to update the I by 1. Because first time when the compiler execute all these things inside the outer for loop, the I was just number 1, represent number 1. And after the compiler finish execute everything, all the lines inside the outer for loop, the compiler will get to update the I by 1, which means I it will be or increase value number I by 1, which means will increase I by 1, and I it will be 2, it will represent 2. So again the compiler will get back to the condition of the outer for loop, I less than or equal 10, true, which means 2 less than or equal 10, true. So again the compiler will get back to execute this line of code, the string plus I already represent 2 now, and also get back again to the inner for loop, do the same thing for the second times table, which is number 2, because I already represent number 2. So here we have now j equal 1, j less than or equal 10, 1 less than or equal 10. Already for second time we use the inner for loop to let the compiler print for us the second times table of number 2. And yes, it's true, 1 less than 10, j less than 10. So compiler will go here inside the inner for loop, execute this line of code, I multiplication j. I here is not represent 1 like the previous time. Now I already represent 2 because we upgraded after we exit this inner for loop after its condition become false, and get back the compiler to the I update and increase I by 1. So I already represent 2, instead 1 represent 2. So here next time when the compiler will print this line of code inside the inner for loop 10 times, it will be represent 2, which means now we print the times table of number 2, I multiplication j, I multiply j, which means 2 multiply 1 equal 2 multiply 1, 2. 2 multiply 2, 4. So now we already display or print the times table of number 2, and so on until the condition of the inner for loop become false. The compiler will exit this inner for loop, go to the last line of code inside the outer for loop, and print this line of code and increase the I by 1, I plus plus. So let's do run first to see how this program gonna work. We have the first for loop that we called it outer for loop, and we have another for loop that exists inside the outer for loop, and we call it inner for loop. So together we call them nested for loop because one inside one. We have here for keyword, open bracket, initialization, which means integer I equal 1. You already know this. And after that condition, I less or equal 10, semicolon, this is the condition, and semicolon, I plus plus, this is the update. While the condition of the outer for loop is true, the compiler will execute what inside it. What inside the outer for loop? This line of code, I equal, this is string, I equal, the compiler displayed on console screen here and saw it on console screen, I equal, and 1. Why the compiler print 1 here and we write it in the code I? Because I represent 1 as we explained before a million times in the previous lessons. So while here we write it like this, in the string I equal as a string, the compiler will print it all the time, I equal, and it depends about the I represent which number the compiler will display it on the console screen according to the value that's stored inside the I. While now I stored inside it 1, so the compiler display for us on the console screen number 1. So I equal I now represent number 1, and after that we have the inner for loop. What we have in the inner for loop, we have initialization, condition, and update. So in initialization is j less than or equal 10. J represent what? J represent 1, which means 1 less than or equal 10. The condition is true, so the compiler will go inside the inner for loop to execute for us the line of code of the inner for loop, which is I 1 multiply 1. Why I printed here on console screen as a 1 or display as a 1? Because I represent still 1, and multiplication is the asterisk. It's displayed on console screen as a string, so we printed on console screen as a string here, the asterisk, and j still represent 1, so the compiler displayed console screen 1. So here I, which means 1 multiply 1 equal as a string, I multiply I. This is like math here, process we do it, not string. I multiply I, it's give us 1 multiply 1, it's give us 1. And while the condition still will be true, because the compiler will get back to update to upgrade or increase the j value by 1, which means j it will be 2. So 2 less than 10, the condition is still true. The compiler again will go inside the inner for loop to execute this line of code. It will print for us 1 multiply 2 equal 2. And the compiler will get back into the j plus plus, j it will be already represent 3. So again, the compiler will check the condition is still true because 3 is still less than 10. So the compiler will get inside this inner for loop and print the line of code inside this inner for loop, which is it will give us 1 multiply 3 equal 3. Why 1 is not changed? Why the I value not changed? Because I value will remain constant until the inner for loop condition become false. And the compiler enter exits this inner for loop, get back again to the outer for loop, update the I by 1, and check the condition of the outer for loop. If it's true, it will get inside the outer for loop to execute again this line of code, the inner for loop line of code. This is code, actually it's easy, and this is how we use nested for loop for many things, not just these things, not just to build or create times tables. We create also for printing a lot of things that we'll take it in this lesson. So this is the times table. It will be printed like this. Every time the I value change, which means we print times table of the specific number after we upgrade or increase the I by 1. That's how we use nested for loop. This is the code. Just try to write it by yourself and try to look at it while you write it, and you will understand by yourself. It's easy so much to practice more on nested for loop and know how to use it more better. Take another homework and have many examples and many homeworks and many different codes using nested for loop to get used about it and be familiar with the nested for loop. All right, let us take another example and use nested for loop to practice on the for loops, nested for loops more. Let's do run first to this program to know what we will get from it. Perfect. The compiler give us this line of stars or asterisks, and if you look at it from far away, you will see it as a square. So to build this square from the asterisks or stars, we'll use nested for loops or two for loops, one inside each other. And the outer for loop actually is for the columns. All right, I write it here for you as a comment. The columns is, or the column is the outer for loop, and the inner for loop is the rows. The columns of the shape on the console screen, it's the outer for loop, and the inner for loop, it's the rows. So here when we come set integer I equal 1, this is the initialization in the outer for loop, and I less than 10, which means 1 less than 10. Yes, it's correct. The compiler will print for us the first start in the column. All right, and in the inner for loop, the compiler print for us the rows, the stars next to the first start, which means we have here 10 lines of stars of 10 lines of asterisks, and each line has 10 start. The first line has 10 asterisks, the second line has 10 asterisks, and to make each line has 10 stars, we use the inner for loop. In the inner for loop, we have also initialization, j equal 1, j less than 10, it's true, so please go print for me this star and upgrade the j by 1 or increase the j by 1 because we said update j plus plus, and now j represent 2, 2 less than 10, it's true, print for me for second time star until the j become 10, 10 less than or equal 10, 10 is not less than 10 but equal 10, print for me the last star in the first line, and I increase the j by 1, j it will be already 11, 11 less than 10, it's false, 11 equal 10, it's false. So the compiler will exit this inner for loop and get back to the outer for loop, go one line /n to go one line and get back to increase the I by 1 because the I value stays constant until the compiler finish from the inner for loop. Until the compiler finish from the inner for loop, get back to the outer for loop, increase the I by 1. I already represent 2, so 2 less than 10, that's true. So the condition of the outer for loop, it's true, and the compiler will get back again to the execute what inside the outer for loop, which is the inner for loop inside the outer for loop. This is if you want to build square from asterisks or stars, you have to use nested for loop. But if I want to build or create or display on console screen triangle, not square, we will come here in the condition of the inner for loop. In state 10, we will replace it with I, which is the variable of the outer for loop. We will put it inside the condition of the inner for loop, And once we did run again, let's do run to see first the paradigm on the console screen before we explain this nested for loop. Look, this time the compiler brings for us triangle from the asterisk or the starts. How this happened? It happened because here when the compiler come read first the condition of the outer for loop was true, I less than 10, that's true, 1 less than 10, so the compiler go inside the outer for loop to execute what inside the outer for loop. And once the compiler go inside the outer for loop, found the inner for loop and check the condition of the inner for loop, j, which is represent 1, less than or equal I represent still 1, will not still increase it because still going to execute the code inside the outer for loop, which means 1 less than 1, no, but 1 equal 1, it's true, so the compiler will print 1 star and increase the j by 1. So j already represent 2. 2 less than 1, no. 2 equal 1, no, because I is represent 1, so 2 already bigger than 1 and not equal 1, so the condition it will be false and the compiler will go another line slash n and get back again to the I and increase it by 1, and I represent already 2. 2 less than 10, it's true, so the compiler for second time get back to the inner for loop and check the condition. J, which is represent 1, j less or equal to, yes, j it's less than 2 because I already we increase it by 1 just right now. So j, which is 1 less than 2, it's true. The compiler will print for us in the second line of code the first star, which is here on the console screen, and increase j by 1, and j already now represent what? J already represent 2. So 2 less than or equal to, yes, 2 is not less than 2 but equal to, which means the condition it will be true, and the compiler will print for us this start for second time that you saw it on the console screen here in the second line of code. So we have now 2 starts, and the compiler will get back again to increase the j by 1. J already represent now 3. 3 less than 2, no. 3 equal to, no, so the condition of the inner for loop it's false. The compiler will get back to execute the code of the outer for loop, which is the slash n, and get back again to I, increase it by 1. I already know what? I already represent 3, so 3 less than 10, true, so get back again to inner for loop to execute the inner for loop condition at the line of code of the inner for loop. So this program it will print for us first start, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars till 10 stars, and it will give us the final paradigm or shape triangle on the console screen. Now let us take another example. For example, if we want to print this triangle but opposite, we start from 10 stars, 9 stars, 7 stars till the triangle end up with the 1 star, which means we want this triangle but we want it opposite. Let's see how we can do this. So we come here in the initialization of the outer for loop. We will start from the peak. For example, we'll make it 10 instead 1, and I greater or equal 1, and I minus. So first thing we will have what? We will have 10 stars, and after that 9 stars, and after that 8 stars, 7 stars. Let's do run to understand me. And like this, we will flip the triangle that contain from stars or asterisks, and instead start from 1 star, start from 10 stars, and end up with 1 star as you see on the screen. Why? Because we just change the value, and we instead increase the numbers. We decrease because we start from the I equal 10. The value of variable I, we make it 10, and we say 10 greater or equal 1, that's true. So the command will get inside to the outer for loop and execute the code that inside the outer for loop, which is the inner for loop. The inner for loop, it has j till I, which means 1 less than 10. Why 10? Because I represent 10, because we change its value, which means the compiler will print for us the stars first time in first line of code, and after that compiler will go line and get back again to the I, decrease it by 1. I already represent 9, so 9 greater or equal 1 is true, so the compiler will get back again to the inner for loop and go to the condition of the inner for loop. 1 less or equal 9, it's true, so the command will print for us 9 times of this start in the second line of code, and after that go another line, and so on until the triangle or until this nested for loop end up with 1 start and become false. The program is finished. That's how we flip our triangle on the console screen by using nested for loop. But if I want to print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 till 10 and 1 to 9 and 1 to 8 and 1, like so. Instead, the first line of code I have 10 starts, I want to print 10 numbers from 1 to 10, and the second line of code from 1 to 9, and in the third line of code from 1 to 8. Instead, I print stars. I want to print numbers. How should I do it? So I go here in the inner for loop and I erase these stars, just make it space, and less than, I will put J. Letter J. Why I will put J? Because J, it's represent the numbers. Once the compiler check the inner for loop condition is true, will print for me J, and J it's represent number, and it's increased every time. So the compiler execute this line of code of the inner for loop, the compiler get back to increase the J. So the J value, it will be changed. It will be first 1, after the 2, 3. So while here we have I still represent 10, and J it will increase 10 times, which means it will start from 1, 2, 3, 4, and every time I print J, so every time I print different number. So let's do run first to understand what I mean. Perfect. Instead, we let the compiler print for us in the first line of code 10 stars next to each other. We let the compiler print for us the numbers starting from 1 to 10, and the second line of code from 1 to 9, and the third line of code from 1 to 8. Why? Because each time the compiler come here, check the condition of the inner for loop, the I, its value already changed. After the inner for loop condition become false, the compiler go second line and get back to the I of the outer for loop, get back to the outer for loop variable and increase its value by 1. The I, it was represent 10, and the second time the I represent 9, and the third time the I represent 8. For that, this program display for us on constant screen triangles contains from numbers. So if I want now to replace the numbers starting from 1 and 1 to 1 to 3 and 1 to 3 4 till 1 to 10, instead I start from 1 to 10, I would start from 1 and 1 2 and 1 3 1 2 3 and till 1 10, which means I want to flip my triangle that is contained from numbers. What should I do? I will get back here to the outer for loop, and I will change the value, make it 1 and make it less than 10, and I plus plus this time. All right, it's same exactly like with the asterisks or stars, but here in the inner for loop, in the line of code, we use J variable name because it contains numbers or store inside these numbers. And let's do run now again. Perfect. It starts from 1 and 1 2 and 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5 till 1 10. So that's how you create triangle from numbers by using nested for loops. Let's go to another example. All right, the second example, if I want to print from 1 to 10, from 2 to 10, from 3 to 10, not just from 1 to 8. Other one just to decrease numbers from the end of these numbers. Other one just decrease numbers from the end. I want also decrease numbers from front. As you see in the console screen, I want to print on the screen from 1 to 10, and in the second line of code from 2 to 10, and third line of code from 3 to 10 till compiler print for me just number 10. If I want to build this triangle and decrease number from the beginning of the line of code, not just from the end of the line of codes, I will come here in the inner for loop. I will set in the initialization integer j equal I. Why integer j equal I? Because I now represent number 1 here in outer for loop. So I value, it will assign to the j variable. So here when we come to the condition of the inner for loop, j less than or equal 10, it's true. 1, it's less than equal 10. Why j it's stored inside it 1? Because I still represent number 1, right? So 1 less than 10, it's true. Please print for me j. Please print for me number 1. Why number 1? Because j is stored inside number 1 because I still represent 1. So the first number, it will be printed number 1, and the compiler get back again to j, increase it by 1. So j it will be 2 until the condition of the inner for loop become false. The compiler will go to do /n new line, and after that increase I by 1. So I already represent 2. So here 2 less than 10. It's true. So go back again to inner for loop. J equal I. I already represent what? 2 because we just increase it right now. So number 2 that is stored inside variable I, which is the value of I, it will assign to j. So j it will represent 2 now because we take j value from I, which is I now already represent 2 because we already increase it. So j, which means 2 less than or equal 10. Yes, 2 less than 10 but not equal 10. So the condition is true. So the compiler will start to print the numbers in the second line of code from j, which is represent 2 now. So for that we have on the console screen from 2 to 10 in the second line of code, and so on until the condition of the inner for loop become false. The compiler will get back again to the outer for loop, increase the I by 1, and I represent 3. 3 less than 10, it's true. I get back to the inner for loop. J equal I already represent what? I represent 3. So we will assign to the j 3, and here we will say 3 less than 10. Why 3 less than 10? Because j value, we take it from the I variable. and I already represent 3 because we increased it already 3 times. So now 3 less than or equal 10. It's true, 3 less than 10 but not equal 10. So the compiler will start to print the numbers from j, which is already represent 3. So for that, in the second line of code, you will see compiler print for you, display for you constant scheme from 3 to 10 and so on till print for you just number 10. So let's jump now to another example. And if I want to print letters, not numbers, I want to print letters as you saw it on the console screen here: A, B, A, B, C, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E, F, till A to Z. How can I do this program? How can I print this letter in this shape, the triangles letters on console screen? We will come here in a outer for loop. We will say integer I equals 65. Why 65? Because as we said in the previous course, that number 65 represent a capital letter according to the ASCII table that handle English language, and Unicode table handle the rest of the languages in the world with their characters and everything. So 65 is representing computer a capital letter, not small capital letter, a capital letter. All right, so 65 represent a, so we will want to print a on the console screen. We will start with 65. All right, not 64, 62, 63, 65, because 65 start to represent letter a as a capital letter. And so I less than 90. Why 90? Because 90 is represent the capital letter I plus plus. So 65 less than 90, true. The compiler will go to inner for loop to execute the code inside the outer for loop, and inside the outer for loop it exists the inner for loop, and inside the inner for loop we will say integer j equals 65, j less than or equal I, j less than or equal I, because we want to print first a and after that ap and after that apcd. So we will start with 65 less than or equal 65, because j here we assign to 165 and I still assigned to it or still represent 65. So 65 less than or equal 65, because j stored inside as we say 65 and I also stored inside 65. So 65 less than or equal 65. It's not less than equal 65 but equal 65. So the condition is true. The compiler will come to execute for me the line of code inside the inner for loop. But instead just we write j, we want the compiler print for us the character, because if you just write it like this j, the compiler will print for us the numbers, not the characters, because j is represent 65. When I write it like this j, compiler will understand to print the value that is stored inside the variable j, which is number 65. To switch it or let the compiler print for me the letters, I have to do casting. I will open two brackets here and I will write char, that stands for characters. So now the compiler will understand that I should to display on the console screen letters, and 65 represent a capital letter, so the compiler will print for me a, AP, ABC, ABCD. So the compiler will print for me the letters, the numbers. Let's see how it will be if we erase the character, the casting, because we would char data type next to the j, which means we do casting, we convert the numbers to letters. But if we just keep the j without casting it, the compiler will print for us, as you saw on the console screen, the numbers starting from 65, 65, 66, 65, 66, 67 till 90. But we don't want these numbers. We want to print or display on console screen the letters. So we will open bracket and we will use char data type. So the compiler will understand now that we have to convert the numbers that represent letters and display it on console screen. Perfect. After we do casting to the j variable, the compiler print for us the letters as you saw on the console screen: a, b, a, b, c, a, b, c, d till a to z. So that's how we use for loop. That was the lesson of today, and we're still going to use nested for loop in future courses more and more. In this course we just introduce for you the concepts of the programming, and we will practice on all these concepts that we take it in this course. In the future more and more I will take more new things, advanced things. We just try to explain to you the concepts in simple ways. That was the lesson of today, guys. See you next lesson. Ciao.